Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 6th of February, and joining me on this, the first edition of February, is Assistant Editor Steve Withers.
I only work in black and occasionally very, very dark grey.
News Editor Mark Hodgkinson.
Darn.
Audio Reviewer Ed Selly.
All I'm asking for is total perfection.
And special guest star Mark Botwright.
I'm going to unleash my secret weapon. Good
for you. Like I say, 1st of February. Is your car here yet, Ed?
No.
Okay, we'll move that on then. You can let us know if and when it ever turns up.
I'll set up a little website.
Car updates.
I'll set up a Tumblr. Is Ed's car here yet? And you can check in for regular updates.
Can't you set up one of those cameras that just follows it, looks on your driveway, like that puddle in Newcastle?
I don't know. I'm sure you can if you weren't a blithering incompetent like myself. But I'll see what the Osmo can do.
Okay. Let's just quickly stay with the car theme. It was the last Grand Tour that went out Friday as we were recording this. So if you listen on Monday, the last episode is up there on Amazon Prime Video. I've watched every episode. I know most of the guys here won't have, but Ed might have.
I've not watched every episode. I've watched most of them. I think it did pick up. I did enjoy the Maserati one. I thought that had some actual moments. And I will say, I don't know if it was last week's one where they had the little sequence with the launch control. That was the first genuinely funny sequence. I mean, actually something that was just properly preposterous and properly amusing that I think had appeared. That genuinely made me laugh. Not least because I remember you were waxing lyrical about launch control in your old car.
Yeah, well, if anybody's got launch control on their cars, it's such an impractical thing. Usually it takes about 6 menu button presses to get it. So if you're sitting at the lights and you want to burn somebody else, you have to sit and go through this menu and then that and by that time the light's gone green and everybody's away and you're still trying to sit in the set. But there is that side, but the funny side is that it, obviously when you put your foot on the brake, and this is automatic cars, you put the foot on the brake and then you floor the throttle and it makes that da 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 sound. Yeah, and that was the whole skit, was just the car sitting with the launch control on at different things. It was just so funny. It really was really good.
So I think it's picked up. I don't think it has a proper identity of its own yet. Yeah, but if they're throwing this much money at it, I'm sure they'll work that out over time.
There has been a couple of down points. What was funny the first couple of episodes was the celebrity brain crash thing. I'm not going to spoil it for people who haven't seen it, but that joke wore thin pretty quickly. The first few weeks it was really funny and they were really quite inventive about what they were doing with the special guests. And then it got really repetitive, and I know that the joke was to be repetitive, like sometimes Seth MacFarlane will use it on Family Guy where, you know, he goes well past the point where they should have cut, if you know what I mean. And I know what they were trying to go for, and it just wasn't funny enough, unfortunately. And there's a couple of weak episodes in there. The 2-episode thing over Christmas, I didn't think that worked. It wasn't as entertaining as I think they nailed that. They nailed that in the one year where they went to and they found the baby Stig in the manger. That was the funniest one when they did the Middle East tour. And the other downside for me is the American.
Yeah, that's not terribly successful.
No, it's not funny, and he doesn't look interested. And you have to wonder if he's actually, if he's not interested, you have to wonder, well, is he actually doing his best to get the best times out of the cars? And the other thing for me is the track. I'm not taken on with the track. So yeah, there's a few things that didn't work, but then there was other things that were just absolute pure genius and did work. And then when they do interesting car reviews, and I'm no mentioning this because I went and bought one, but the one where they did the Focus RS against the Mustang, it was relevant because it's a question everybody was asking because they're the same price in the same car range. So which one should you go for? Because the Focus RS makes more sense for British roads than a Mustang does. And it was quite funny the way that they pitted the two against each other. So when they do car reviews like that, it really works, and it's really quite enjoyable. And they're obviously answering the questions but in a roundabout way. So yeah,
I did like the James May Le Mans thing with the GT40 and the P3.
That was absolutely brilliant. Same episode, so I think it's episode 5 or episode 6. Same episode, that one was there. And the thing was, Ed, I don't think you saw it at CES, but certainly me and Steve did, was they had that GT40 on their stand at CES, and they had a virtual reality, which was the pits at Le Mans. So you could actually look around the pit area where the GT40s were and that kind of thing. That was really good. So,
which Phil had a go on, didn't you, Phil?
I did, yeah. That was really good, really entertaining. So, okay. So Grand Tour, marks out of 10.
7.5.
Okay, I'll give it an 8. it's promising, and it's still better than Top Gear at the minute. But I am interested in Top Gear because
that's not saying much, though, is it?
Yeah, but the thing is, I think that there is a spark there, and hopefully this series of Top Gear that's coming up, where it's just Matt LeBlanc,
Chris Harris,
and Rory Reid. I think there's a bit of chemistry there. There's also a bit of hatred there, people who don't get on, and that sometimes works really, really well. So I don't think it's any secret that Chris and Rory rub heads together. They're banging heads together. They don't quite get on, and I think that works well. I think it works good with the chemistry. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm not sure when Top Gear's coming back. Should be soon though. Anyway, let's move things on. Competitions. What can we win? Let's go to Mr. Botright.
Right, you can win Deepwater Horizons on Blu-ray, and that runs till 10th of February. We've got a Warner Brothers bundle of The Hobbit, Battle of the Five Armies, Inception, Gravity, Pacific Rim, Jupiter Ascending, and 300 Rise of an Empire. And those are all on DVD, and that runs till the 12th of February. And we can also win a Sony 43XD80 UHD TV from AO, and that one runs till the 28th of February. And standard, all competitions open to all eligible members, residents in the UK, Ireland, and the Isle of Man.
Excellent. I like how we shortened the model number there to XD80. That's quite good thinking,
yes.
there, Steve. Rather than the long-winded one that it actually comes with. And Mark, is there any previous competition winners?
Yes, we've got. I'm just looking through my glasses. Red won. He won. Oh, I've said one too many times. It's weird now. Yeah, he won. Variety on Blu-ray, and Mr. Furious won War Dogs on Blu-ray.
Hopefully making him momentarily less furious.
I don't know. That film goes one way or the other. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the humour, but I know that people who have similar taste to me went and seen it and didn't like it. So one of those that could go either way, really.
Is it about war or dogs?
Neither. It's about gun smugglers.
Oh, won't watch it then.
It's actually really quite entertaining. It's about a couple of dropouts who
I enjoyed it.
Basically land on their feet very quickly, and then it all goes wrong again.
And they end up with a massive contract with the US military, which they didn't have to fulfill.
Yeah. And it's about where they procure their armour.
Was it like a million rounds of ammunition for AK-47s they got to find?
Yeah.
Some dodgy Eastern Europeans.
And they have to drive it through Iraq during the Iraq War. Yeah. And it's so funny. They don't realise just how dangerous the thing is that they've done until they've done it.
Because they got the driver and they goes, what's the chances of getting there? They go, 50-50 during the day. We'll go at night. What's the chances at night? 50-50.
So congratulations. Congratulations to our winner. Red One there. Did Red One survive? Yes, I think Red One did survive. He got away.
Red 5 that got blown up, didn't it?
Yeah, it was Red 5 that got blown up. Yeah. Sky and Discovery. So we had Red Edge Rant last month. Week, sorry. Well, it was last month, and it was last week.
Month, yeah.
So now that they've actually sorted out the deal, at the last minute, I hasten to add, it really came down to the wire. So the deal's been done. So Discovery is staying on Sky. There's no details as to who actually backed down. I think that was maybe one of the points as to how the deal went through. They both got to save face. They both got to blame each other in their marketing, and both moving on now.
Sky did say, though, didn't they, that Discovery had agreed to the deal they put on the table a week ago. So they were kind of claiming victory, I think.
Although there's more to it, because there appears to be a rider on it about price increases and profit share as a result of those price increases.
Uh-huh.
So it's all the thing. No one comes out of this looking good. Essentially, if this is how negotiations between companies are going to be held now, with them just bitch fighting with each other on social media, and essentially emotionally blackmailing their consumers, I for one am not particularly thrilled by it. If you look through the thread on the forums, a number of people actually cancelled subscriptions. Now I'm not gonna lie, I think that was a bit rash. I would have at least waited until the services had disappeared, but a number of people are in a state of limbo now, having cancelled subs, possibly with a view to going to other things, and then obviously things are staying as they are. So it's been there's a word starting with cluster, which I would use if this wasn't a family-friendly environment. Yeah,
it's not
something
a
like
bomb,
that.
is it?
It's just a mess. No one comes out of it looking good. I'm very pleased that the channels have stayed. I do enjoy Discovery's content. I enjoy Eurosport. I'm not quite so thrilled that the Learning Channel continues, because I just seen enough to say yes to the dress to last me a lifetime.
I was just saying, I thought that was your favourite programme at the minute.
I used to love it. Extreme couponing is awesome. I won't hear a word said against extreme couponing. But no, say yes to the dress is just essentially find the most annoying person you can, which in America, let's face it, they've got some options there, and fundamentally just watch them play dress up for half an hour with people with accents that you could actually chew on. But my wife likes it. That's why I've seen it a lot. So yeah, not ideal, but that's just by the by. I'm very pleased the channels are staying. I'm not pleased at how it panned out. If this is a precursor to how these sort of negotiations are going to happen between services going forward, then frankly they can all do one.
Yeah, it didn't look good for either of them, to be honest. And but at least you've got History and H2 back as well, so you can watch those, Ed.
Endless porn stars and Hitler.
Yeah, and if you're watching H2, it's Ancient Aliens. So how aliens came in the far past and they created the pyramids and everything.
Crazy hair.
Alternative history channel these days.
That bloke with the huge hair. I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens.
Yeah.
So yes, that's by the by. As I say, I'm very glad to have kept Discovery. I'm quite glad to have kept Discovery Turbo, because if I'm doing some work on a Sunday, there's nothing like a good wheeler dealers marathon. Even in SD, I can cope with a good wheeler dealer marathon for the entire day whilst I get some work done. I quite like that.
The Discovery Turbo for me during the day, in the background, where you've got wheeler dealers, you've got chasing classic cars, you've got super yachts, which is usually quite good because they're doing AV installations and stuff in those. It's quite interesting to see how they do that kind of thing. And what's the other one that's on there? They're all repeats, so they're all Fast and Loud, and it's like season 1 of Fast and Loud. New one started on Monday. Did you see it, Ed?
No, not yet. I'm well behind on. Annoyingly, Phil, I was doing some work. I supply. I'd like for the record.
That's right. It was end of the month. That's right.
End of the month. I'd like to point out for the record that everything went up on time. I even put all the hyperlinks in, so Steve didn't bitch at me.
Yeah, but there was still.
You got the titles wrong, though, didn't you?
Look, I'm not. You've got things to do. It's a work in progress. All right.
Yeah. How long have you been putting stuff into our CMS, Ed?
A while.
Yeah, okay. So that's Sky and Discovery. They're back together again, kissed and made up, and neither are giving up the public persona as to who gave in first to sign that, but at least it's signed, and Sky customers don't lose the 13-odd channels that they would have still been charged for. I mean, it was not as if Sky was going to give them a discount, was it?
No, not at
all. Right, so moving things on. Steve went to a trade show yesterday in Weybridge. The only good thing about Weybridge is Mercedes World, I think. Anyway, so you went there, Sony Trade Show. What did you find out?
Well, I should probably start this by saying that I didn't see anything that hadn't already been announced at CES. So everything that I saw was already had press releases and been fully announced. I got to see a few things we didn't get a chance to see at CES because obviously they only had a limited number of TVs at CES. So I got to see the entire 4K TV range. But when I got there, they said, one of the PR girls said, can you just sign this NDA? There's 2 things you're seeing today that aren't public yet. Oh, that's good. So I signed it. And as we're going around, I was talking to one of the Sony people. I said, what are you showing us today that's new then? And he said, what do you mean? I said, I had to sign an NDA when I came in. He said, did you? I said, yeah. We're not showing you anything that hasn't been announced. You weren't supposed to sign an NDA. And then I sort of realized that they obviously thought when I arrived that I was a dealer and they're being made to sign NDAs. Because obviously they're showing them 2 things apparently that haven't yet been made public, which I guess is a lesson they learned last year when they didn't tell us about the ZD9, but they showed it to the dealers and it was all over the forums the following day.
Yeah. Well, certain dealers, you got to be careful with dealers. They will break NDAs and all the rest of it.
So what I did see, I saw obviously they had the A1 there, the new OLED TV. I had a chance to actually see it in action in a nice dark room. Also had a chance to hear it in action, and that was the bit that was particularly interesting because we'd seen the TV in action at CES. We had a pretty good idea; it looked great, but they also play some audio stuff, and it's really interesting. I mean, this will probably interest you as well, Ed, because obviously, as we know, they use actuators behind the panel to vibrate the panel, so the panel itself is a giant speaker, effectively. And one of the things that concerned me was, if that panel's vibrating, and it is vibrating, you can touch it with your hand and feel it, would that affect the image quality? And I certainly couldn't see any detrimental effect from it. And they said they tested it, and because of the large surface area, they're only vibrating at a tiny amount, so it won't affect image quality, even if you had it at full volume. But what it does do, which is quite clever, of course, is it as something moves across the screen, the sound follows it across the screen. They had a demo with an animated bird flying backwards and forwards across the screen, and the sound would actually move across the screen with it. So that was actually quite clever. So interesting piece of technology there, something a bit different from the rest of the crowd. It looks stunning. I mean, as I think Ed said.
I think the important thing here, Steve, is how much.
Annoyingly, you go all the way there and no pricing and no dates yet.
Jesus.
The only thing I can say is that the Ultra HD Blu-ray player is £400, and the only reason I know that is because they cocked up their website a couple of days ago, accidentally put the prices up, and then brought them down again really quickly, and that one had been noticed by somebody. So they did confirm that. I think what's the point of bringing us all the way out here and not giving us information like dates and prices, because that's what people want to know. So I don't know yet how much it's going to be, or even when it's coming out. What I can tell you is we've got the A1 OLED. There's the XE94, which is the 75-inch with the full array backlight, and the XE93, which is the 55 and 65-inch with the edge LED lighting using the master backlight drive, the really thin panel. They've also got the XE90, XE85, and XE80 Ultra HD panels. What they did say was they will be, as we know from CES, adding Dolby Vision to any of the TVs that use the X1 Extreme processors. That's the ZD9 and the XE94, 93, and the A1. So they're all going to get Dolby Vision added. And they also said that they'll be adding HLG, hybrid log gamma, to all their 2016 and 2017 TVs that use Android as a platform. So that's good news for anyone who has a TV from last year. You will be getting HLG added in a future firmware update. Otherwise, though, as far as the TVs go, apart from the demo of the, and we had some demos of the XE93 against the XD93 and things like that, and they also had some demos of the player in action, showing the shallows on a ZD9 and also on the Blu-ray of the shallows showing on another on an XE93, so you can see the differences there. So that was all quite interesting. But as far as pricing goes and dates, which I think is what everyone actually wants to know, and got the information. Also saw their new soundbars. So they've got a couple of cheaper, smaller soundbars, sort of aimed to work in smaller UK living rooms. Also had their Dolby Atmos soundbar, which we didn't actually get an audio demo of, and you got to see it. But they were demoing their new AVR, which is coming out soon, which will be at the Bristol show if you're interested in seeing it and hearing it. That does support Atmos and DTSX. So that's about it, really. There was no surprises, unfortunately, and no information on pricing or dates.
Okay, so let's take this into the AVForums podcast arena. So the A1 comes in what screen sizes, Steve?
Comes in 55, 65, and 77.
Okay, so 55-inch. Let's have our guesses at price here. I'm going to say 3,200. Hodge?
I was going to say 3,200, but I'll say 3,249, just to be a bit different.
Okay, Ed?
2,999.
Okay, and Mr. Boring? he's having to quickly chew on that bacon roll. Hurry up.
He's having a good think about this.
We've broken bot, right?
You're on next, so you better come back.
Sorry, did someone throw to me quickly there?
Yeah.
Yeah, quickly.
Well, the building or something.
The call of nature. Cool. Sorry, what was it about?
Just say a number.
Price,
say any number.
Yeah, just say a price.
A price?
Yeah.
Oh, 4,500.
Okay.
And Steve?
Yeah, well, I'm probably going to go with Ed on the 2,999. I reckon it's going to be that range, 299 to 3,299, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. 65-inch, right? So I'm going to say $6,000. Hodge?
I was going to say 5,200.
Okay, Steve?
4,999.
Bot right?
I'll go whatever I said last time. $4,500 again.
Okay. And Ed?
5,499.
Okay. So I was a bit toppy there. 77-inch, I'm going to say 25,000. Steve?
Yeah, 20 grand. I don't know. It's going to be something like that, isn't it?
Okay. Ed?
1995. Yeah. £5 under 20 grand.
You mean one in all the nines?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Hold out your hand.
Okay. Mr. Boatwright?
20,001.
That would
I've
be
seen the prices right.
a bold pricing strategy.
And if I missed anybody, Hodge? Did you say?
19995.
Right.
And I might have missed a 9 out. But,
So one all the nines and a 5. Basically, right? Okay, be interesting to see if anybody got anything correct there. We're probably miles
This
off.
first time for anything.
Right, so let's move on because it comes with Android TV, doesn't it, Steve? Sony
indeed,
TVs,
yes.
yeah. So let's move on to the NVIDIA Shield then. Is it Shield 2 or is it Shield TV 2? Or I guess we don't know what it's called because I think Steve started out in his interview at CES calling it the Shield TV 2 and the guy didn't like that. But by the end of the interview, he was calling it that. So
Yeah, I called it the Shield 2, and he said, no, it's not called that. And he said it's called the Shield. So, and then I started calling it the Shield TV, and he kept saying the Shield. But by the end of the interview, he just given up on it and just said Shield TV as well. So I don't know what the bloody thing's called anymore.
I don't think anybody knows what it's called, but it's the second generation of the Shield. It's out now, Hodge. You've had a good look at it. The review's been out a few weeks now, but I guess it gives you an opportunity now that the review's out, whether you want to make any amendments to that or not, or just tell us all about it.
Yeah, it's the Shield TV, I call it, because there is a Shield tablet, so it'll get confusing otherwise. So, yeah, the Shield TV. It's when you say it's a new product, it's more of a refresh really to the old one. It's still based on the Tegra X1 processor, which is going to be used in the Nintendo Switch, or at least a modified version of it. So nothing. I mean, that processor was so far ahead of the game in the market. There was no reason to change it. So they've used the refreshed hardware to launch a load of new features, or at least announce a load of new features that are coming. The changes hardware-wise with the 16GB version, at least, which is the one I reviewed, is you lose an SD card slot and a mini USB. And you get a new remote which loses the headphone jack and the recharging capability, so it runs off batteries. That's a new remote. It isn't quite as nice, isn't quite as good, but you do actually get it in the box, whereas last time you didn't. You just got the games controller, which kind of it would put people off as a media device, because the old games controller was very cumbersome, a big object. You didn't want to use it as a remote particularly. So they've also redesigned that, and that's fantastic now. It's an excellent controller. It's right up there with the Xbox One and PS4 for me, at least as good. And that contains a headphone jack. So if you want the private listening feature, which is I find really handy personally, if you want to whack the volume up late at night and not wake the family up, you can stick your headphones in, and it's pretty good. Like I say, the most of the new features are going to be software based. So the new Shield came with Android 7, which Nougat, if you prefer, which also brings with it various new features. Although some of them aren't included yet, to be fair, but the ability to add USB tuners, so use it as a PVR. There are smart home facilities. It's fully compatible with Z-Wave and Zigbee protocols. It's already got a Nest app, I believe, just in the States. It's compatible with Samsung Smart Things. So you'll be able to control your smart home going forwards in the future at some point, just with your remote. One of the big features coming later on, although they've not given a date as to when, is Google Assistant, which is Google's answer to Siri, basically a hands-free voice assistant. To go along with that, presumably at the same time, they will release the is it the dot or the spot? Which one?
Because
it's the spot and Amazon's
and the spot is their one. Yeah, same thing.
Yeah, so it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same idea as that. You plug one of these into your mains, and you can ask your Shield questions as you go about your daily business. The always-on capability in terms of the microphone for that feature is also features in the games controller, and I'm not altogether clear whether it features in the new remote or not. I've seen someone from NVIDIA saying it does, and I've also seen some from NVIDIA say it doesn't. So we'll find out when Google Assistant gets launched whether that is the case. Now, one of the big improvements for me, and Steve will back me up on this, is Android TV UI. Certainly in the early days, it was all over the place. You'd be scrolling all around down pages to get to settings and various things, and they've completely consolidated all that. So basically, you never really leave the one screen to get at anything you want, and it's really nicely designed, extremely slick. It does make a difference to usability. It's only a menu at the end of the day, but it does make it a bit more of a connected experience. NVIDIA have been touting the fact that the Shield TV, Shield 2, has the biggest 4K and HDR ecosystem in the world, and that's probably the truth. It's got a newly added Amazon app, which is obviously 4K HDR. It does Netflix HDR. It streams games, game stream 4K HDR, up to 4K HDR over your network, that is. It's got Google Movies 4K, YouTube 4K, Hulu 4K. So there's got an awful lot of the latest generation of video content available. Talking of games, it's consolidated all that into under one roof as well. So you can have your Steam app running from your PC in there. You can stream from your PlayStation. You can use the GeForce Now Android games. GeForce Now is like an all-you-can-eat $7.49 a month streaming service. So you can stream into 1080p at 60 frames per second using NVIDIA's server cloud, which uses GTX 1080 GPUs in the processor. So the graphics are really impressive, and it doesn't lag at all. I'm really massively impressed with GeForce Now. I was last time, but it's got even better, to be quite honest. It's also an excellent media player. It's got a Plex server and client app, so you can organize all your media from your Shield, from connected storage, or from your NAS. It plays nice with Kodi 17, which is just out. There's also a particular version of a fork of Kodi called SPMC, which is basically built around the Shield, so it plays back virtually everything. Does auto refresh rate switching. It plays back HDR, 4K, passes HD audio. About the only thing it really doesn't do is play 3D. It's a mightily impressive box of tricks, really. It does all sorts. It's not perfect. There's some color space weirdness goes on. You have to use a workaround to get Netflix at 23.976 frames per second. The Amazon Video has got a really bad audio lag on it, which is something that I think happened after there was a small update after the review went out. And I'm not sure whether it's Amazon Video to blame or whether it's the NVIDIA, but that certainly needs looking at, because at the minute I couldn't use it, to be quite honest. It's so far out, and it drifts and it gets further and further out as you watch the programming. But all in all, it's the product by which all the other Android boxes should really be judged.
Well, I was surprised that you gave it a reference badge, because any of these boxes are absolutely perfect, because anything that runs on software tends to be like that. You get some things that really do work well, and things that other things that don't. And then you, obviously each box is different as well in terms of what it will handle, will it do refresh changing and all the rest of it. So I was surprised you gave it a reference badge. So why was that?
Well, purely because of what I said. Because if I was, like you say, I mean, different boxes serve slightly different purposes. You can get one that's a straight media player, not necessarily Android ones, but it's all in the same market, that will play back more media. And particularly, we're talking about 3D here. But as an all-in-one entertainment center, then it's the best. It's the best of the best, really, to be quite honest. So it's not perfect, but I would say it's the best, and that we need a reference.
Yeah, so it's the one that you're going to refer to. Everything else has to be referred to it, basically.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
And unfortunately, you mentioned 3D. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, sorry about that. Well,
he'll be off. He'll be off in one in a minute if you keep mentioning that word. Yeah. Kind of
stand in front of the mirror and say it 3 times.
We'll talk to the TV manufacturers. That's all I say.
Yeah. What happens if he stands in front of the mirror and says it 3 times? Does Steve suddenly then appear? Does he?
You suddenly get a lot of extra depth to the image, but awful crosstalk.
Oh, right, okay. I thought you got Steve turning up saying there is no such thing as 3D anymore.
I think he's burnt out, or he's gone for a wee. One or the other.
Well, I'm here.
It's always there, always listening. I'm doing this deliberately, you see, guys, because the last few episodes we've done this where Steve doesn't get a word in edgeways in the first half, and it goes swimmingly. It's really tends to be working here. And thankfully we're going to Mark Botwright next, so Steve will have to wait even longer. Right, so Mr. Botwright, you've been surprised at something, what?
Yeah, well, in fact, we may be throwing to Steve in a second, because this is about PSVR.
Oh,
yeah. It turns out 10% of users playing Resident Evil 7, which is a big kind of, huge release. And so it's kind of numbers that a lot of people didn't expect, considering there's 1 million in sales. So that puts it approximately 100,000 users are playing it in PlayStation VR, and it's a multi-format title. So that's going to include PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC gamers as well. So, that's a huge amount of people are looking to this game, and it shows just how eager VR users are for new experiences, and they're willing to jump on something at launch.
But is that just a case of, like everything new, they'll just jump at any content that's available?
Well, to a certain extent, perhaps, but I mean, there's always been this slight worry that the kind of mainstream industry and the offshoot of VR wouldn't merge well together, that in fact we'd have kind of little experiences tied into mainstream games and that they'd be nothing more than novelty value. However, it seems like, according to a lot of reports, playing Resident Evil 7 in PSVR makes it a genuinely different and more engrossing experience. So it's
genuinely bowel-loosening experience.
Oh, it is, yeah.
Exactly.
That's one for the cover. You can quote me on that if you want.
Yeah, but is that the game or just the fact you're talking to somebody who's getting on in years now?
It's awfully scary, dear.
Adult diapers are optional, but it's definitely a game where you want to wear your brown trousers if you're going to play it. Because
sponsored by Imodium.
I've got the game. I haven't had a chance yet to actually play it properly, but there was a short demo called Kitchen, which was released on the PSN before Christmas for PSVR owners to just sort of try it out, which I did do. And it was absolutely terrifying. At one point, I screamed like a little girl. And Laura came down and said, "Are you all right?" And I said, yes, sorry, that's just quite scary. Honestly, because it's not... Unlike playing a normal video game where you're looking at a TV, you're in that world, you're in that room, and if you turn around and there's a zombie right behind you or something lurches into your face, you can't help but flinch and scream.
I literally shat myself. Steve Withers, AVForums.
That would be that'd be the review. So good, I literally shat myself.
Smell my fear.
So I haven't played it yet, but I'm looking forward to it. But I'm also quite trepidant because I think it's going to be quite a scary experience.
It's all make believe, dear.
Yeah,
well, you say that, Phil, and that's absolutely cool. There's not really a zombie lurching in it, but your mind doesn't act like that because you're so immersed and you're in this world. There's another game I played. It's called London Heist, but one that's just two sort of options at the end, the way the game can end. And one of them is the guy lurches in and stabs you, and I flinched. I literally moved back and flinched because I thought I was getting stabbed. I mean, your brain does override. You forget you're not in that world, and you're actually sat in your lounge.
Have you seen? I mean, there are loads of clips of people falling over doing things in VR. Have you seen the clip of Ronnie O'Sullivan playing snooker?
That's hysterical.
Goes to lean on the table and just goes flat on the floor.
Remember, Steve, if you die in the Matrix, you die in real life.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what have you set your safety protocols at?
Yeah.
I mentioned it before, but there was playing it was the same game, the London Heist, but where you're in a van and you're driving along and there's rushing mobsters on motorcycles and in vans attacking you and you're machine gunning, you've got a machine gun and you're firing at them. I reached across to reload the gun and grab some ammo, and I hit the pillow of the sofa, cushion on the sofa, and it freaked me out because I'd forgotten I was actually sat on the sofa. You just were in that world. I mean, and it's something that I've never experienced before. Certainly not with gaming. I mean, if the idea of a game is to immerse you in that world, then VR genuinely does that. I mean, you are in that world, and the only thing where you got an issue, obviously, with VR is walking around. So all the games I've played today have involved sitting.
I think we put a video out for CES. It would have been 2016, so it would be 2015. If you want to go and look for it, it's called VR Games. But there's a clip there of a guy, I think Stuart filmed him, wearing Oculus Rift, and the way that this guy's going on is hysterical. It really is. The way he's reacting to things and looking around and all the rest of it. It's really funny.
So I look forward to hearing your Resident Evil 7 impressions anyway, Steve.
Yeah, well, I'll give it a go at the weekend, and then between now and the next podcast, and I'll let you know what I think.
I
just can't help but think of
die in the Matrix.
I think
the line in Family Guy. Sorry, the line in Family Guy: "When you poop in your dreams, you poop for real."
Yeah, I think the most entertaining thing would be if you set the Osmo up in the middle of to one side of the room, one corner of the room, Steve.
That could potentially be absolutely.
That'd be really funny.
That's not a bad idea, actually. I might do that.
Not least because we need to get hold of the lovely Mrs. Withers to also just further mess with a man who can't see anything because he's wearing a helmet.
Yes, I think we should leave whatever they get up to in their spare time off camera, Ed.
I was more thinking about it's more you get either mints or like a raw octopus, and it's like onto the back of someone, even when they're not playing Resident Evil.
If Laura did touch my shoulder during the middle of a game like that, I would absolutely shit myself because you would just freak out. Suddenly something would be touching you that's not there. That would be very freaky. It's hard to describe to you.
So Laura, if you are listening, you know what you need to do.
Yeah, just make sure that it's not in the dark in the room, or otherwise it won't pick it up. You have to
You have to do it in fairly bright light because there's obviously a camera on the top of the TV that films, so that the headset. So it sees the headset, so it knows where your head movements are and stuff. So.
All right, that's good. So the video quality will be good then.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Sounds like a tutorial on how to induce a heart attack.
Yeah, well, right. So let's move things on then. Let's stick with gaming because I think there's another interesting story there from your beloved Nintendo, Mark.
Well, yeah, it's kind of wearing black armband time. The Wii U has ceased production. I don't know if anyone's actually surprised by this, as I think most people assumed that it had done some time ago, and they were just trying to get rid of anything that was left in factories and warehouses everywhere. But it's kind of, I don't know, it's a strange one to reflect back on so soon, as it's even though it's just ceased production, it seems like it's been dead for some time now. Since
it launched, surely.
Yeah, well, it's a strange one because it just never really got going. Even though if you look at the catalogue of titles that they put out, the first party output is it's pretty strong, and I think it's going to be one of those consoles that are a bit like the Dreamcast. It'll be, or even the Saturn, looked back at with some fondness, and I think certainly collectors will probably hold on to them. Decent catalogue of first party titles, but beyond that, it reads like a kind of list of mistakes that you could make releasing a console and how to make sure that it doesn't sell.
Are they making those mistakes again, Mark?
Yeah.
Well,
they've done it twice.
Yeah, they are to a certain extent. But the problem is that they've kind of muddied the waters for themselves in that the Switch is consolidating a handheld and a home console. So you could argue that a certain amount of those mistakes for a home console are mitigated by the fact that they still have a reasonable market there for a dedicated handheld, i.e. no one else, Sony have pulled back from the Vita, no one's really releasing a dedicated handheld, so they're hoping that there's still enough of a market there, even though it's dwindling somewhat in comparison to mobiles, to make it viable. But the Wii U was just a case of the price point was too high in relation certainly to the Wii. I think they banked on the hope that, shall we say, some of those casuals that they'd managed to win over in the era of the Wii would stick around, and they didn't. The marketing was poor. It led a lot of people to kind of think that it was just a tablet controller for the Wii. It took them a long time to transition to HD development. There were long software droughts. So the problem is with something like that, it inevitably sells out at launch because it's a new product. That happens, and it'll happen again with the Switch. The issue is then building momentum and whether you've got any chance to kind of create that momentum with a price cut. Now, they managed to do so with the 3DS when that stalled. But around the time of the Wii U, there was the strong yen. They were sold at a loss to start with, the small loss. There was no real room for a price cut. They were using custom, semi-custom components. So some of these things are kind of replicating what they're doing with the Switch. But, just focusing purely on the Wii U as it is, I think it's a console that people will look back with a certain amount of fondness on.
I still like mine, but I've only ever bought 2 games for it. It was just, it still gets used by my 8-year-old, but yeah, I do feel a little bit let down by Nintendo in this instance.
Yeah, I think it was just one of those cases where it's hard because it was fairly clear early on what needed to happen. It needed to have the price slashed, and it needed more software. And then when it seems like a certain amount of that, certainly towards the end of its lifespan, has been kind of rolled over towards the Switch, and should we say figures have been moved over to Switch production, and it feels like they realized early on that it was going to be kind of this stillborn product and just focused everything towards making the next one better.
It's got total global sales of 13.5 million. That's pathetic, really, isn't it?
I know. But the fact is, again, kind of Nintendo fans will point to the success of the Wii, but more and more, if you look at the trajectory of Nintendo dedicated home console hardware sales, it's downwards. It's the Wii looks more and more with each passing day, just like that anomaly. They grabbed that casual market. Motion control really. It interested people. It was something new. It was something innovative. It was, you didn't need to learn to use traditional controls to be able to play Wii Sports. And Wii Sports as a pack-in was that was brilliant. You had a console, under £200. You got a pack-in game. Someone who's interested in the medium can be playing the latest Zelda, but you can get the family involved as well. That didn't happen with the Wii U, and it's not going to happen with the Switch either. So, it kind of leaves them relying on hoping that there's enough of a market in that kind of consolidation between home console and, the stronger handheld sales.
Mm. A bit of a precursor to VR almost, wasn't it, without the headset? If you see where I go.
Oh yeah. It definitely. I mean, it's an interesting. I still maintain that they could have done a lot more with it, and that's one of the big issues is the fact that they've got this tablet on it, which has pushed up production costs significantly, and they failed to show what it was going to be utilized for. That they had Nintendo Land, which didn't even really work as a good proof of concept. You need to be launching something alongside that says this is what the second screen's for. And ultimately, there was also the confusion about the fact that you've got 2 screens, so it's hard to have a universality of the experience, because for certain games, it would just be a case of, well, what's the selling point? Well, you can be playing the game on your TV, and then a family member comes in, wants to watch EastEnders, fine. Now you're playing it on the tablet in front of you. That's a good selling point. But then how do you mix that with, say, the idea of dual screen play, where you need the tablet to be playing something on the TV? There were lots of slightly kind of mixed ideas in there. It seemed very much like throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and just hoping some of it stuck. But I'm keeping mine anyway.
Yeah,
good stuff. Right, so to wrap up on hardware this week, we're going to go to Ed, because this is a bit of technology which I should really be interested in, as should most people who are listening to this podcast. But I guess it's been the presentation so far to the marketplace that my eyes just glaze over whenever this subject's mentioned, and I don't know why. It might just come down to the way it has been marketed and the spokespeople for the technology, and we're talking about MQA, Ed. But I've forced you to spend some time getting to know it and finding out all the ins and outs. So what have you found out?
Well, this kicked off some time ago. MQA was announced about around 2.5 years ago, originally as just a spin-off of Meridian Audio, the British hi-fi company. In a nutshell, because I'll try and make this as approachable as possible. MQA works along a similar fashion to how we deal with compressed audio formats that we've been using for the best part of 20 years. The difference is that it's not compressing it down to below CD quality. It's taking files that are originally much larger than CD sized, turning them into something which comes down an internet pipe at roughly CD sort of size, and then unpacking them so you are given the original high-res file as it was. So there's nothing lost, but it's essentially using sort of packing and compression techniques to get it to you in a more easy fashion. There are other parts to it. If you want a much better explanation than I'm going to give you, go and have a look at the interview I did with Spencer from MQA at CES, because he is, as you might imagine, as someone employed by MQA, he's quite passionate about it, and he goes through all the ins and outs. And I've written a piece which will go up a bit later on, which covers a lot of what he's been saying. The thing is, those of you with reasonable memories will know that we get the new Wanda 2-channel format every couple of years, and by and large it gets completely ignored and goes nowhere. And I think right up until December the 31st, 2016, most of us would have said the same thing was an inevitability for MQA. It was an answer to a question that nobody asked. Thing is, whilst we were out at CES, the announcement came through that the Tidal streaming service was going to start using MQA to deliver high-res audio to customers by using this compression point, so it came down without putting too much strain on your broadband or on Tidal servers. And we've discussed the Tidal Masters. It works. And what was interesting is that the way that MQA is being used is different to how we thought, or how we'd been told it was going to see use in these applications. Because whilst MQA compatible products exist, for example, that Pioneer digital audio player that I reviewed, the XTP 100, that is now MQA compatible, so it will directly play and unpack MQA files itself. Tidal's different. They're not waiting around for you to all buy an MQA compatible device. The MQA decoding is built into the desktop app, so you can use it with any suitably equipped USB DAC that you might have lying around, or even to an extent just from your computer's headphone output. And this means that you're essentially seeing the benefit of MQA without having to invest in more hardware to do it. Now, this is pretty radical stuff for 2-channel, actually ensuring that you don't have to spend a fortune on hardware that may or may not be completely and utterly useless in 10 years' time is something that we've learnt the hard way. Doesn't inspire much consumer confidence. So all of a sudden, if you've got a Tidal subscription, you can experiment with both MQA and with high-res audio. And the inference, again, if you look at the interview, is that there are other people talking about such a thing at the moment. I don't want to get over sort of excited here. There's still a long way to go before we could exactly call this a mainstream undertaking, but MQA has managed to do. It's interesting, Phil, you were saying about the marketing. However periodically aggravating we found it, at the very least they have tried to do some marketing and actually get it out there as a concept, and it does appear in a small way to be paying off. And the other thing that sort of ties into this is that if we're honest, Tidal's own future and finances didn't look exactly rock solid, but about a week and a half ago, the American mobile provider Sprint has bought a quantity of shares off Mr. JZ, and that does look like they are going to try and introduce it to their not inconsequentially sized customer base, which does give more scope for it to actually continue and survive. And if that's the case, we might, after a mere 30-something years of trying, finally be ready to start listening to music in better than CD quality.
I think another big turnaround for Tidal, while you're mentioning that, Ed, is the fact that Metallica now let them have their back catalogue and new stuff. And that's usually a sign that if they trust you in what you're doing, you're obviously doing something right.
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of artists that Tidal has managed to secure that don't appear either properly or at all on any other streaming service, and it must be said, for people who aren't wildly keen on copy protection and rights management, I'll be completely honest, MQA does offer some quite significant potential to prevent you from half-inching artist material using conventional means. So that's another possibility as well. It's cynical, but that sort of comes with the territory. And if you like, it's helped both services. It gives Tidal a USP because there are other lossless services. I mean, obviously there's Cobuzz, Deezer now has their unlimited. It's abundantly clear that other services will be considering it. So Tidal's up the quality game, and at the same time they're bringing to the public's attention a different way of doing that, which at the same time is ensuring that they should be able to listen to this high-res material, and it's not having, I mean, I don't know, Steve, have you tried listening to any Masters stuff on your broadband connection?
I have not yet, although I was planning on doing that later today, actually.
It'd be interesting if you can feedback. I mean, as I say, if you can...
Ed, sorry, something I wanted to ask you, because I proofed your article, so I've got a rough idea now what the answer is going to be, but I think it'd be interesting. As far as MQA goes, you don't have to have specific MQA-capable equipment to enjoy the benefits of MQA, do you?
No. There's two layers to this. With specific regards to Tidal, MQA unpacking occurs on the Tidal software. So you simply receive a high-res digital signal which your USB DAC can crack on with. If you're downloading MQA files, and there are some sites that sell them, if you have a piece of MQA compatible equipment, it will unpack it and you get a high-res signal. If you don't, it will still play it as a CD-sized file. So again, lessons have been learnt about compatibility. If you have an MQA catalog and okay, your main hi-fi system is MQA compatible and it can unpack them, but you've got some other equipment in other rooms which isn't. If you've got everything on random and that other equipment encounters the MQA file, it's still going to run it, which is something that if, for example, you're using DSD, that's much less likely to happen. So again, lessons have been learnt here. This is one of the more refreshingly adaptive approaches to bringing a new format to market. Equally, there has always been the argument that if you don't place enough impetus on how new and distinct it is, no one pays any attention. So that's historically why people have gone all in on making theirs the next big thing. But we've failed enough times in that, DVD audio, SACD, etc., that I think this is a much more sensible approach.
Good stuff. So that's MQA as it stands at the minute. The article will be up by the time that this podcast goes out, or certainly within a couple of days. The podcast going out on Monday. So keep your eyes open for that article. Time to move on. Time to go to movie news next. So in December, I was up on the unlimited card. January was a fail, unfortunately.
Right, back down again.
Straight. They got 18 quid out of me, and I didn't spend anything on the card. So yeah, minus 18 for January, unfortunately. February off to a good start because I went to the cinema yesterday, so Thursday at the time of recording this, to catch up with Trainspotting. Now it's been out for 2 weeks now.
It came out last Friday.
Last Friday, so yeah, so a week it's been out. It's done good numbers. I had a lot of concerns about this film, mainly because you can't capture lightning in a bottle twice, and it was never gonna happen. I mean, the original Trainspotting came out in '96. It was where everything was just about to explode in terms of Britpop, in terms of Rule Britannia, in terms of Labour winning by a big majority the following year. Everything was on and up at that moment in time back in the '90s. And this film, this little British film made by Danny Boyle, who'd only made one other film up to that point, and that was also set in Edinburgh, called Shallow Grave, and it also was Ewan McGregor's first film. Yeah, interestingly. Right. This was his second film. Again, starring Ewan McGregor, but this was the film that catapulted certainly Ewan McGregor and Robert Carlyle on the big screen. And yeah, it sort of caught the wave of enthusiasm that was around at the time, a little bit like 2012, in the UK, sort of that fever. So that was never going to happen again. We're 20 years on it, and there's been a lot of debate about, and you'll agree with me with this one, Steve, about how long this should be before there's a sequel. And there's been a lot of debates about that recently, because there have been some really big gaps between sequels recently to films and so on.
Yeah.
So, how long is too long when it comes to a sequel? Where I think Danny Boyle gets around this with Trainspotting 2 is that the whole story is about nostalgia. The whole story is about, when I first saw Trainspotting, I was 22. I'm now 42. 20 years ago. Roughly the same age as Renton. I think Renton was 26 and he's now 46. So the whole character base, they were young in the original film. It's about the passage of time. It's about everything that I think everybody in this podcast has been going through for the last 20 years. Things have changed so much. You go back to 96, mobile phones were just a thing back then. The internet wasn't a thing. Social media certainly didn't exist in any form back then. And the way people made their living was different. And this is something the film touches on as well. So it's not just social media and mobile phones and designer drugs and all that kind of thing. It's how we, as a society, have moved on in terms of prospects. If you're working class these days, you've got so many more prospects in front of you than you did back in Leith in 1996, where there was a huge drug problem. The docks had closed. Leith was deprived area. There wasn't any money being spent on it. And certainly I moved to a new town in 98, which had been a big steel town, and it had closed down. I was moving into an area with roughly the same kind of problems. And you look at the area now, 20 years on from when I first moved here, and 20 years on in Leith, and the places are just so different because there's been investment, because things have changed in terms of careers and all the rest of it. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of the nostalgia. There's a lot of what actually happens over time, relationships and friendships. So you might not see somebody for 20 years, but you were best buddies at school, and there seems to be this thing where you just fall back into your friendship, if you know what I mean. You discuss the last 20 years, but it's almost like you didn't stop talking to each other, if that makes sense. And there's a lot of that in this film, which makes a lot of sense to me. And I'm not going to go into any spoilers whatsoever. But what you have to remember as well, going into Trainspotting, is that these are not nice people, and we wanted to like them in the original film. And the film plays on this as well, and it goes back to it, that these are not nice people. They didn't do very nice things to each other, but actually when you look at life and you look at people around you and all the rest of it, it hits a chord. Other things I liked about it, lots of Hibs references, which is only right, it's set in Leith, so there should be. And there's a great story about George Best playing for Hibs, which did happen, by the way, and it was a big thing up in Scotland. It was the twilight of his career, and he was getting paid a lot of money to do it. But he did come and play for Hibs back then, so George Best did play for Hibs for 1 year. And there's a great joke, there's a great story about that in the film as well, which is really good. The characters are interesting. It's great because I think
there are new characters in it, though.
There are, and they're well played, and they fit with the story. That's as much as I'm going to say, because otherwise it spoils it. There are some big spoilers in here, there's some big surprises, there's a few twists. Begbie
Are there any laughs in it?
Yes, yes. Yes. There's lots of laughs. There's one where, again, I'm not going to spoil it, but they go to a social club in Edinburgh. Now, this would happen in Glasgow. It wouldn't happen in Edinburgh. But obviously the film's set in Edinburgh, so you just go with it. But it would happen more in Glasgow with the sectarian stuff. And it is just so funny. There's a lot of 1690 in this scene. A lot of King Billy, William Orange. You get the idea. And Renton and Sick Boy find themselves on stage in this social club. That's as much as I'm going to say. Scene of the film. Absolute scene of the film. But yeah, it's like the original Mark. There's a lot of really, shocking stuff.
Yeah.
But it's offset by real dark humour. Really dark humour. Yeah, I had a real experience at the first film when I saw it on the screen, because it was a full screening. There was only about 6 people in the screening I was in, and I think I laughed more than anybody else in there. Because there's a lot of jokes in there that I think maybe went over some people's heads and that kind of thing. A lot of really dark, callous humour in it. But Begbie is brilliant. Robert Callaghan. I'll say this for everybody. Everybody was up for this film. You can tell because they're putting their heart and soul into it, and they are straight back into character. And it's about Renton coming home, and obviously the consequences of that after what happened in the first film. But I think there's an interesting take on that. Again, I'm not going to spoil it. But for me, it's an 8 out of 10.
I didn't realise how little time Johnny Lee Miller was actually able to give to it. I mean, almost everything he did was shot in an unbelievable hurry.
Yeah, well, the whole thing was, but you wouldn't know that looking at it. I mean, it was a really short production time. They did it through the summer of last year. Edinburgh looks beautiful. It's just, it's a cinematic city, and I'm surprised that more films are not set in Edinburgh, because you've got a mix of the old town and the new town, and new buildings like the Scottish Parliament and so on. But you've also got Arthur's Seat and the scenery round about, and there's a scene where they go out running, and they end up on top of the hill and overlooking the city with the sun high in the sky, and it just looks beautiful. I mean, the director of photography really nailed the look of the film. And that's another thing. It's a 1:8:5:1 frame, same as the original. Now, the original was shot on really cheap film stock, because obviously it was only Danny Boyle's second film. It was funded by Film 4 back then. Like I say, I mean, it basically
I watched the Blu-ray film like 2 weeks ago, and I've got to say it looked bloody awful.
It did, because of the film stock that was used. Yeah. It's never ever going to look good, but it gave it that gritty look that it really needed. The first one, second one's I would say there's a lot of grain in there. It's obviously been shot digitally and added in, but it still has a nice look to it. It still has a really nice look to it. But it's a little bit more with the times. It's a little bit more flashy. It's a little bit more slick looking. But yeah, highly recommended. But the thing is, if you're a youngster, and when I say youngster, if you're in your 20s, I don't think you're going to gel with this film in the same way that people our age, and I mean people in their 40s, are going to gel with it, because the first film was a film of its time and of the time, and I think the same with this film. It is a film of the time it is set, which is now, and it's about 40-somethings and where they are in life, and where how life's treated them and how things have changed around about them, which is the big thing right at the start of the film. How much Edinburgh's changed in 20 years. So it's really, really interesting. Lots of reprises in there, and when I say reprises, a lot of reprises with the music themes as well. So a lot of stuff that doesn't appear on the soundtrack album that came out last week, but were in the original film, and it's almost like echoes of the past. You just catch the theme now and again, if you know what I mean. It's hard to explain, but when you watch the film and you're listening to the soundtrack, you'll get little reprises now and again of themes like Born Slippy and Pulp and that kind of thing, but you'll just get little snippets of them. And another thing that he does really well, and it's going to sound terrible, because when you explain it, and when it was explained to me, I thought it sounded terrible, but there's actually snippets of the original film in this, and the way it's done is really quite clever. And again, it's harking back to that memories, nostalgia, where things were, and trying to find your youth again and that kind of thing. It's all in there. Really, really good. 8 out of 10 from me. It was never going to beat Trainspotting, but in terms of living up to what it was back then, and like I say, it's a film at its time now. Really recommend it.
But it doesn't crapple over the memory of Trainspotting or ruin that.
No, it plays on the memory of that, and it plays on the memory of it the same way as you will sit and think about what you were doing back in the 90s. Well, you probably kind of remember the 90s, Steve and Mark.
I remember the 90s. It was the noughties I'm a bit vague on.
All right, okay. Yeah, it's like where we were back then, and like as I say, just before Labour came in and all the rest of it, and there was that euphoria, and there was things were different back then. There was a real sort of energy about the country in general, whereas this film really plays on where we are now, and harken back to memories, and like I say, there's a lot of reprise in there, so a lot of things sort of just pop out now and again, and you think, oh yeah, and things start to click together. And again, I'm not going to give you any spoilers. You just have to go and see it. So I worry about those in their 20s going to see it, because I don't think they're not going to connect with it the same way as people who saw our age group who saw it back then when it should have been seen, and this is the next step. Where are they 20 years later, kind of thing. So yeah, really good.
They sold it to me, that's for sure.
This is well recent. You already got your tickets booked.
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
So like I say, that's been out for a week. So if people want to go to the cinema this week and see something new, Steve, what can they see?
Well, there's a couple of interesting things this week. First of all, we've got the Lego Batman movie. Now, I know you and Mark, Hodge, and me have all seen the Lego movies. Mark and Ed, have you seen it?
No.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I thought it was
film
superb.
of the year that year.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was everything. You think the Lego movie is going to be a massive hour and a half advert for Lego, which in a way it is, but somehow they managed to make a film that was anti-consumerism at the same time, which was quite clever of them, and it was very, very funny. very clever, very well made. Now, I have to say the Batman Lego movie is not directed by the same guys, Chris Miller and Phil Lord, who made the original movie. They're doing something else, which we'll talk about later. But it does use the same voice cast, and obviously Will Arnett, who voiced Batman. Batman was one of the standout characters in the Lego movie, has now got his own movie. It looks funny, certainly in the trailers I've seen, it looks very funny. And if it delivers the same amount of laughs and sort of, visual gags and everything else that was in the original Lego movie, then I think this would be fun. So that should be quite good fun. That's coming out on Friday. And also we've got Billy Lynn's Long Half-Time Walk. Now this is directed by Ang Lee. And it's interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's shot in 3D at 4K, which is unusual because normally a 3D movie is shot at 2K resolution. This is 4K, so you're getting a full 4K 3D experience. But also, and this is even more unusual, he shot it at 60 frames a second. Now, whether you'll be able to find anywhere in the UK that can show this film as it was intended to be seen in 4K 3D at 60 frames a second, I don't know. But that's the way it was conceived and shot. Now, I have read reviews from the States because it opened in the States last year, and there was certainly most reviews, apart from Variety, for some reason, were quite keen on it. Most reviewers hated it, and said it looked like video, and the high frame rate ruined it. Which comes as no great surprise to anyone who's seen The Hobbit at 48 frames a second. It'll be very interesting though, because in 2 weeks' time, this comes out on Ultra HD Blu-ray in the States at 60 frames a second. So we'll be able to actually see at least the 4K 2D version in 60 frames a second.
Steve,
and see what that looks like.
I thought this was shot at 120 frames, was it not?
Oh no, sorry, you're right. Yes, it was 120 frames a second. The disc coming out at 60 frames a second. The film was shot at 120 frames a second. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Phil. Yes, so that's the way it was conceived and shot. 4K 3D, 120 frames a second. Although I believe what Ang Lee was doing was changing the frame rate depending on certain scenes. So he was trying to use the higher frame rate to make the walk, because what the concept of the film is, Billy Lynn is an Iraq war veteran who's at, I think it's a Super Bowl, and during the halftime, he and his squadron, his brigade, walking up in with some flags and stuff, doing a parade during the halftime show, and whilst he's doing this, is flashing back to his experiences in Iraq. And I think what Ang Lee was trying to do with it was to use the higher frame rate to make the battle scenes more visceral, more realistic, more like you're actually there. And some people thought it worked, and most people didn't seem to like the use of the higher frame rate. But you're right, Phil, it's 120 frames a second, although the Ultra HD Blu-ray will be 60 frames a second. So still higher frame rate, but not as high as it was actually shot at. So that comes out. Like I say, whether you can find anywhere in this country it's going to be showing it as it was made is another issue entirely. And with it coming out on Ultra HD Blu-ray in just 2 weeks in the States, it might be worth waiting and then importing.
I think a lot of cinema chains are still not very happy that they got burnt when it came to Avatar and having to upgrade their projectors, and The Hobbit and having to upgrade the projectors. So I don't think there's anywhere in the UK, because I think unless it's an independent place or unless the film studio are going to pay for certain places to upgrade, I think there's a bit of resentment in the industry at the minute in terms of having to upgrade for one film every now and again.
Yeah, this is really an experiment, I think, on the part of Ang Lee. I don't think this is the way of the future, at least not for the foreseeable future. I think most filmmakers, certainly anyone I've ever read about, with the possible exception of Cameron, but he seems to be taking forever to do Avatar 2, 3, and 4 anyway. The use of higher frame rates really hasn't gone at all. People prefer using 24 frames a second because it looks like film, and that's just the way it is. And it's an artistic choice, obviously, but that's the way most people go.
Yeah, it's an aesthetic choice. It's the way that it looks, and that's because the thing is, it's when it comes to film, and I think this is the best argument for it. A film is not real life. Film is a story. It's a story being told, and it's like a painting. It's like something else that tells a story that it's not trying to recreate reality. It's trying to set a scene to tell a story. And there's so many subtle things that happen with film. It's not just about frame rate. It's about certain colours being used in certain scenes to evoke emotional response that you're not actually aware of at the time, but subconsciously there's little things that can be played or put in the film, or the use of colour and so on, or desaturating something to give it a certain look. It's not just artistic, it also impacts emotion on the end user. and the person watching the film. So it's not just about making things look natural and all the rest. It's about telling a story. And 24 frames just works in terms of giving it that aesthetic look to then build
By
on.
the same token, if you are going to shoot something in a wildly different format, a film comprised entirely of small plastic people, it seems like quite a lot. I'm only being slightly facetious here. It strikes me as a logical place to try. One of the things about The Hobbit, which I think came back to bite it on its arse, is that it didn't look like Lord of the Rings. It had people that we'd seen and constructs that we'd seen, and then looked different, and we took the different to be not right. Yeah. This is something so wildly different. Why not give it a go? I'm quite open to the idea of it, although I appreciate that you can't actually see it that way.
Yeah. No, I can see it that way. It's just that because it's so wildly different, nobody's going to get to see it the way it should be seen.
This is true.
There is that aspect.
I admire Ang Lee for trying to push the envelope in terms of technology, trying different things. But
there's some things that have happened in the past that I wish I was around for when it comes to film. One of them, funnily enough, would have been 1939, seeing Technicolor for the first time. I would love to have seen that because that was a big push. That was
the audience of The Wizard of Oz as they go from black and white into colour would have been pretty impressive.
Yeah. It would have. The original 3-strip Technicolor, unfortunately, none of it exists anymore. But to have seen that in the theatre, that would have been something else. And there's other jumps like CinemaScope back in the 50s and Cinerama. I would love to see. I've been in a Cinerama theatre. I haven't seen a Cinerama film using 3 projectors and that really wide screen.
Avatar you saw at Cinerama?
Yeah, I saw Avatar on the Cinerama screen, but it only used a portion of the Cinerama screen. It didn't use the whole thing. But yeah, I'd love to see Cinerama. And there's other things that have happened. But the interesting thing is, though, that all these things have come in the past, and including 3D. None of them have had higher frame rates. And there's a good reason for that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the reason that it's become more viable is, the reason you wouldn't have used higher frame rates in the past, and the reason that they chose 24 frames a second in the first place was because it was an economic number in terms of delivering, good motion, but without using so much film, it becomes impossibly expensive to make the bloody thing in the first place. Now,
it was also
you can increase the frame
rate.
It
was also sound as well, so they could sync the sound
and sync it with the sound. Yeah. 24 frames a second, they could get good motion, sync the sound correctly, and use the minimum amount of film so it doesn't become impossibly expensive to shoot the film. Now with digital, you can shoot at any frame rate you like, effectively, and it's not going to cost you any more money because it's digital. But it doesn't mean to say you should. It's like shooting, like you were saying about shooting digitally on Trainspotting 2, and adding film grain back in to retain the look of film.
Yeah.
Again, it's an aesthetic choice.
And again, he's mixing the modern with the past as well, which is kind of the theme of that film. But yeah, totally. And there's still filmmakers that shoot digitally, and yet they spend a lot of time making it look like certain film stocks and that kind of thing, because there were favourite film stocks and that filmmakers would use. Anyway, we're way off track on this one. So Blu-ray releases this week, Steve.
Blu-ray, we've got The Girl on the Train, which is a great performance from Emily Blunt in a not-so-great thriller. We've got Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, which is, I think, a real return to form for Tim Burton. I really, really enjoyed this film. It's quite scary too, so probably not suitable for very young children, but certainly for 10-year-olds and above, it's great. Looks interesting. It looks great. It's well made. And it has its third act in Blackpool, which I can't say many Hollywood films probably have. And also we've got Storks, which is an animated film about storks delivering, actually, storks used to deliver babies, and now they deliver packages because no one wanted their babies delivered by storks anymore. And then a baby has to be delivered by accident. Actually, you know what? It sounds silly, but I watched it, and
let me guess. UHD Blu-ray.
Yeah. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. Actually, it's good fun. So that was fine. And also, we've got Michael Mann has done a definitive version. I mean, he's got a bit of form here in terms of his films. Heat is coming out on Blu-ray. In the UK. I don't think it's a US release. I think it's just in the UK. 2-disc set with new extras and his definitive version of Heat with a new 4K transfer, apparently. So
if
you're a fan of that film, and I certainly am,
that'll be interesting.
I would recommend. Yeah, that'd be interesting. So of those films, interestingly, even though it's just had a new 4K transfer, Heat is not available on Ultra HD Blu-ray. Storks is in this country, and Miss Peregrine is available on Ultra HD Blu-ray in this country. The Girl with the Train is available on Ultra HD Blu-ray in the US, but apparently, as far as I can tell, has not had a UHD Blu-ray release in this country. In terms of new releases in Ultra HD Blu-ray, or new announcement, should I say, 28th of March is looking like a very expensive day for me. We've got Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. We've got the last 4 Harry Potter films coming out on Ultra HD Blu-ray that day. We've also got Furious 6 and Fast and Furious 7. So I might take out a small loan, I think, for the end of March.
And you could, if rumours are true, be picking up Star Wars Rogue One on the 28th of March.
On Blu-ray, obviously.
It could be the 27th, and it could be the 27th in the UK because 28th is a Tuesday, which is the US release date. Which is again makes the rumor a bit more viable and a bit more believable that it's going to be the 28th in the US.
That would be consistent with when The Force Awakens came out last year. I think it was the first week of April last year, so it would be about right. And the film is going to be running, finishing its run fairly soon. It's made nearly $1 billion. Well, it's made over $1 billion, and it's made almost as much as Captain America now. So I guess Disney would be about right. And then that leaves them free then after that to start running into the whole Star Wars celebrations with its 40th anniversary and starting the whole marketing campaign for Episode 8. So
it did surprise me yesterday when obviously I was at the Odeon yesterday, and there is one big screen, it's a 200-seater, that's still showing that four times a day. So it's still showing Rogue One 4 times a day at the minute at the Odeon. Certainly in the Metro Centre anyway, so that's interesting. That
brings us nicely on to my new Star Wars news.
Okay, crack on.
Well, just basically last week, principal photography started on the new standalone Star Wars story film, which is basically going to be centering on young Han Solo. A young Han Solo and a young Lando Calrissian, and also a slightly younger Chewbacca, although given how old he is, I don't suppose he'll look much different. And that's being directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who made the Lego Movie, and also Jump Street, 21 Jump Street and 22 Jump Street, and the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs movie as well. So actually, these guys have got a very good record in terms of delivering entertaining, funny, and imaginative films. So I actually do think, and it's from a script by Lawrence Kasdan and his son. And again, Kasdan's certainly a great screenwriter. So that's got potential, I think, real potential.
It has
to the right tone. It could be great.
Yeah, it has to have the right tone. It's a Han Solo movie. It has to be sarcastic, and
cocky, swagger, fun. It needs to be fun. Rogue One was great, but it was not a lot. But it was funny in places. But it was gallows humor the whole way through, and it ends on a real downer. So this needs to be the opposite. I think this needs to be a fun romp, a bit like Guardians of the Galaxy. If you can get that kind of fun romp vibe to it, I think it will do cracking business.
Yep, good stuff. You got one at the end here, Steve. What was the worst film that we saw last year? So we're going to keep this short and sweet because we're way over time. Yet again this week. What was the worst film that we saw last year? I'm struggling with this one, so I'm going to pass for the time being while I have a think. Who's been quiet the longest? Mr. Botwright. Let's get Mr. Botwright. What was the worst film that you saw last year?
Can we go to Steve first?
Well, what, we need people that have actually seen films.
Yeah, in short, I'm genuinely struggling to think of a film.
Yeah, okay. I guess people like us, Mark, who see very few films during the year, although I'm going to have to up my rate if I'm going to make my money back on my unlimited card, is that because we see so few films and we have so few time for films, I think we pick our films better. So when it comes to worst film of the year, this is the excuse I'm going with, so just stick with it. So we pick our films a bit better. So yeah, let's go to Steve, because Steve does watch a hell of a lot of shit, and he actually buys it, even more of it on UHD Blu-ray.
Well, I'm just casting a glance across the Ultra HD Blu-ray line on the bookshelf.
So many to choose from.
Actually, Phil, you have seen a stinker. I know you've seen at least one stinker. You saw Independence Day Resurgence, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I had to watch it just to make sure it was absolute shite. Gods of Egypt is got to be in there too as a really ropey film. That's not good at all. What else have I seen that's really sucks? I don't know. I don't think I've seen that many films that are truly awful. I guess it comes down to your film taste and what you describe as being an awful film, because your awful film might not be anybody else's, but I've got a funny feeling that something that you think
one man's awful film is another man's masterpiece.
Exactly. I think that's very true with you a lot of the times, because you have given praise to a lot of films that I've then gone and watched and I thought, that was utter bollocks.
But Gods of Egypt and and Independence Day Resurgence probably are up there as two of the worst films. There have been films that have had a lot of stick this year that I didn't think were that bad. I certainly didn't think Ghostbusters deserved a lot of the criticism it got. I rather enjoyed it in the end, but a lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people hated it. But yeah, those are the two films that I would personally pick as being really, really, really bad.
I've got one.
There are lots of worse films, but I luckily haven't seen them, Phil, so I didn't see all the Drakes. But yeah, go on, Ed, what have you got?
I didn't see this at the cinema. I need to stress that. As you know, I very rarely go to the cinema. But it was on Sky Movies the other day, and my wife and I tried, and I think we made it about 35 minutes in. And that's Me Before You, with Emilia Clarke from Game of Thrones and a bloke in a wheelchair. It is unmitigated shit. I mean, it's just... It has... there's no... You can't... no one is, doing anything more than phoning a performance in. Script shit, plot shit. It's just shit in every measurable way. I cannot envisage something being worse than that. At the very least, Independence Day Resurgence had explosions in it.
It sounds a little bit like the biopic of the Chuckle Brothers.
That would have been better.
I think that there is an obvious one, and I went to the cinema to see this one, and it was not a great film. I wouldn't say it was the worst film of the year, although Commode has it down as his one of his worst, and that's Suicide Squad. I mean, in terms of technically filmmaking, it's really, really piss poor. But actually, as a film, I found it really quite enjoyable.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it in the end. So,
but it wasn't a great film by any stretch of the imagination whatsoever, and there are huge plot holes and huge bits of the film that had just been cut and dumped on the cutting room floor, and no way to cover over the mess and all the rest of it. But still, it just had that little bit of charm, which made it really, really quite enjoyable. There's another one which I haven't seen yet, but I'm gonna watch it, even though I've been warned it's a real stinker, and that's Batman vs Superman.
Again, I don't think it's a stinker. I think it's got problems, and bizarrely, it's a better film when it's longer cut because it makes more sense. But there's just, with those DC movies, you just feel like they're trying to rush things and get to a certain point. It's just chucking everything but the kitchen sink into these films. And Suicide Squad is a good example where halfway through, they shot one film, a much darker, harder edge movie, but because everyone criticized Batman vs Superman for being, very dark and a bit boring and a bit po-faced, they started to try and up, and obviously Deadpool did really well, being irreverent and funny. They started trying to do reshoots to make Suicide Squad more jokey. And that's when the unevenness of the film and the whole problems with the third act and everything else started to come into it. So whilst it worked gangbusters for Rogue One doing that, deciding, to change the tone of the film and reshoot certain things and change the ending, it did not work on Suicide Squad, unfortunately, but it still remains, I found it to be a surprisingly enjoyable film, despite its many, many flaws.
There you go. I haven't seen it. Might get around to it one day.
I mean, I know one of the Commode's worst films of the year was Criminal. That's the film's title. It also could be accused of being criminal. And I have seen that on UHD Blu-ray. And I actually quite enjoyed it. I didn't think it was that bad. I mean, it is utter...
See, this is what I was getting at.
It's utter hokum. But it was all right.
Well, I think his number one was, it was Bad Grandpa. Yeah.
Or Dirty Grandpa.
Dirty Grandpa.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Bad Grandpa was the Johnny Knoxville one.
Yeah, Dirty Grandpa, which I have not seen. It is on Netflix if you want to put yourself through it. But I didn't. Even I balked to that one. And also, Bad Santa 2 apparently is an absolute shocker, although I have not seen it. But I know Kimari. I think it's Kimari reviewed it. She hated it.
Right. Well,
and she did like Bad Santa. It's not like she didn't like the original film, which is a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine. But she said this was a terrible film. Terrible film.
Are we done? Do you think we can get a time
get out of that one, Phil?
I think, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to let Ed do this one. Do you think it's time to give up, Ed?
Yes, Phil. I think it's time to give up. I don't know if I just stuck a Donald Trump tweet in the comments box.
Yeah, we're all going to die.
I mean, if this podcast makes it out on the Monday, that would be good. It's exciting, isn't it? Actually, there's nothing you can do about it kind of way. So, all good.
So that's it for this podcast this week. My thanks to Steve Withers.
Wiping your bum with a hook for a hand is really hard.
Mark Hodgkinson.
phones going. That's not my line.
Could have been.
We'll use it as your line anyway. Ed Selly?
It will be known as Freedom Friday, but still on a Tuesday.
Mark Botwright.
All you have to do is believe that you are special, then you are special.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and videos, and of course, give us those 5-star ratings on iTunes. It does help us climb up the charts. It allows more people to find us and become hooked to this, whatever it is.
The unfolding horror of the AVForums podcast.
Thanks, Ed. I could have put it better myself. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again, hopefully, next week.